All right. The chat's not going to get the woohoos anyway, so it's fine. But welcome to CS 161 Summer 2021. This is computer security. Presumably you're here because you're taking this course, but if not, that's okay too. Yeah, we're really excited to teach this course. I hope you're excited to learn about computer security. It's going to be a really fast 8 weeks, but hopefully you'll enjoy it along the way. Yeah, Dan Garcia woos, I agree. This is just an outline of what we're going to be talking about today. We'll go through introductions, we'll talk about some course logistics, and then we'll get into some of the meat of what is security and some security principles that we can rely upon. So who am I? I am Nicholas. I'm the person speaking. This is my face. I'm a third-year EEC student, so I joined Berkeley right before the pandemic hit, and then I've been online for actually most of my education. That's all right. It's been really exciting seeing everything go online. I took 161 in the spring of 2020, and then I TA'd for it ever since. So I guess this would be my 4th time teaching, but this is my first time, I guess, instructing it. So there's that. My current research interests are in data oblivious algorithms. So these are algorithms that don't leak any information about the data when they're run on them, normally in terms of memory accesses. So if you're interested in that, feel free to chat with me in office hours. And I guess a random fact about myself, because it was obligatory or something, I don't know. I really like board games, so I'm not in Berkeley right now, and I don't think I'm allowed to play board games with students. But if you ever wanted to play board games with me after the summer session is over, definitely feel free to get in touch. I have a non-negligible collection in that closet over there, so yeah, that's me. Perrin, go for it.
Sure. So I'm Perrin. I'm the other instructor for this class this summer. I hope that I can control the screen. Cool. So that's a picture of me. I'm an incoming 5th-year EECS master student. So I've done my undergrad here for 4 years, and now I'm doing 1 extra year to pick up 1 extra degree. My advisor for research is actually Nick Weber, who teaches 161 all the time. And together we're going to do some research into CS education. So see if we can figure out how to do online exams right. Because if anyone here has been at Berkeley for the past couple of semesters, there have definitely been some wrong ways to do online exams. So our goal is to try and figure out some ways to keep that around. Let's see. So this is my 7th time teaching 161, which even saying it is a little bit scary. But yeah, I've been around since summer 2019. And it definitely feels like kind of a Groundhog Day thing. So every time we do our first lecture and I release Project 1 again, it feels like I've traveled back in time. But it's been fun. I've been around in person and for basically the entire pandemic. So it's been fun to help the class adjust and grow it in all sorts of ways. So that's cool. And we also have a lot of TAs and readers this summer to help support you. So here's a bunch of them. If anyone's here, they can say hi. I'm not really sure. Is anyone here who wants to say hi?
Hi, I'm Ron. I am a reader. You might get emails from me. I'm a grad student, and my pronouns are they, them. Same
oh yeah, Nicholas
advisor
and I forgot to say
as you.
Yeah, Nicholas and I guess forgot to say our pronouns, which should have been on the slides, but yeah, my pronouns are he, him, and Nicholas.
Mine are too.
Okay.
Sorry, it's kind of hard to navigate since we're sharing a mouse, but yes.
Yes. Okay, so I will quickly go over course logistics. Okay, so our goals for this class are to get you to learn about how to think adversarially about computer systems. So as we'll talk a bit about later, security is about protecting our systems against attackers. So we want to learn how to think like an attacker so we can defend against their attacks. We also want to think about how to assess threats for their significance. So if there's a potential attack, we have to know about what kind of damage can it do, and how should we protect against that. We should also learn about how to build computer systems that have robust security properties. So what we mean is when we're building a system, we need to be actively thinking about what are ways that people can attack the system and how should we build the system to avoid having vulnerabilities for people to attack them. And finally, we also want to think about how to gauge protections and limitations provided by today's technology. So what that means is, in addition to just coding things that are secure, you often use other people's code. So you want to use people's websites, people's services. If you're coding, you often have to import other people's libraries. So we also want to teach you how to think like a good consumer, so that when you're picking other people's libraries or services to use, you know what kind of security properties they offer and whether they're being honest about what they're talking about, or if they're trying to exaggerate their security properties for you. Okay, and also we're going to show you some real world attacks. So a lot of the stuff we're going to teach you is actually enough to go mount attacks on your own. Hopefully you don't do that, but we're definitely going to get into the meat of how attacks work. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to teach you over the next 8 weeks. And so here's actually how the next 8 weeks are going to be laid out. So we're going to start with an introduction to security. So that's today, and just quickly talk about, when we're thinking about security, what are the kind of philosophies we take toward thinking about security. Then over the next week or so, we're going to talk about memory safety. So memory safety refers to when you're implementing software, if you do it incorrectly, it's possible that an attacker can exploit that, and we'll show you how that happens. And we'll also show you how you can defend against those. And then in, I would say, weeks 2 to 3-ish, we're going to talk about cryptography. So cryptography is about how we can send information over an insecure channel. So for example, if I want to talk to Nicholas and we're in different locations, then cryptography gives us ways to talk securely so that attackers can't read what we're talking about. And then we're going to talk about web security for the next week or so. So that's probably week 4 or so. And then we're going to talk about on the web, so the World Wide Web, what kind of attacks are present there and how do we defend against those. And then the last part of the class is going to be network security. So that's going to take up the last 2 weeks or so of the class. And there we're going to talk about what attacks happen on the internet and how do we defend against those. And then in the last week or so, while you're studying for the final, we'll just have a couple of fun special optional topics. So those won't be tested, but for the last week, you can come join us and we'll show you some interesting applications of things that we're showing you in this class. For example, turns out that after you're done with this class, you're actually going to understand how you can finish the game Super Mario Bros. 3 in as fast a time as possible. So that should be fun. Okay, and it turns out that even if you never ever think about security again in your life, so you're like, I'm never gonna do security research, I'm never gonna program again, whatever. It turns out that there are actually a lot of extra tools and skills that this class gives you. So on paper, we're a security class, but there are actually a lot of different things you can take away, and hopefully at least one of these will be useful to you, even if it turns out that you never touch security again in your life or anything like that. So for example, in the memory safety unit, we're going to teach you about x86 assembly, which I believe is still the most commonly used assembly language in the world. So most computers still run on x86. So we can show you a bit of how the architecture works, and that'll help you if you want to go into, say, systems programming. We'll also show you how to use GDB, which is a tool for debugging C code. So you may have seen that in other classes before, but after this class, most people usually report that they have a lot more comfortable grasp on GDB. So if you ever code in C in the future, this class will give you a better idea of how to use GDB. And then in the crypto unit, even if you never work on a cryptography research project or anything like that, the things that we teach you in crypto will really help you become a better consumer. So if you're shopping for a security product to use, or you're coding something you need to use a security library, we'll show you what kind of cryptographic protocols there are. And so that when you're looking for tools to use, you can figure out which are the right tools to use, which companies are really selling you great products and which companies are kind of selling you crap. And then in the web security unit, we talk a lot about software engineering. So we're going to show you how websites are built and how does your website interact with remote web servers. So that's a bit of a preview of CS169, which is the software engineering class at Berkeley. So just by taking this class, we'll probably give you like a third or so of the content from CS169, which is cool. And then in network security, we're going to teach you a bit about how the network works. So how does the internet work? How does information get sent over the internet? And that's a preview of CS168, which is the networking class at UC Berkeley. So just by taking this class, again, even if you never touch security again, you will have about a third of CS169, around half of CS168. So you do get quite a lot of value for the class that you're taking, which is very nice. There are a couple of prerequisites to taking this class. None of them are enforced. So if you haven't taken any of these, it's totally fine. But these are the things that we require before you come into this class. And if you don't have them, then maybe you'll have to do a little bit of work to catch up, but it's not too bad. So first we need CS61B, and the reason why we need CS61B is because you need to understand how to work with large and complex code bases, and also some basic data structures like hash maps or trees. And this is really relevant for project 2 because you have to write around 500 to 1,000 lines of code. So having the ability to work with large code bases is very helpful. And if you have experience from other personal projects or classes with working with large code bases, you'll probably be okay, and you probably won't need anything else from 61B. Then 61C, I think, is the most important prerequisite, and the reason is because we're going to talk a lot about low-level memory layouts and assembly code. So for that, 61C covers most of it. We'll spend the next lecture doing a lot of 61C review, so even if you feel like you don't remember 61C too well, hopefully we're going to help you review all of it. And you definitely do not need 61C to succeed in this class. A lot of people will come in really scared thinking, oh, I did really poorly in 61C, or I've never taken 61C. Can I succeed in this class? And the answer is yes. A lot of people have come in with what they feel is, they feel very shaky about 61C content, or they don't remember it, and they still do really well in this class. So it's very much possible. And again, we'll give you lots of review and practice with the resources and concepts from 61C. And another kind of benefit is that 61C is only relevant for the first unit of the class. So around the first 2 weeks of class, you need 61C content. And then after project 1 is over, you can basically throw it out the window because the rest of the classes does not need 61C. And then finally, CS70, which is the discrete math class at Berkeley. And the reason why we require CS70 is because we show you a little bit of mathematical notation and some basic proofs in the cryptography unit. So having a bit of mathematical maturity is useful, but it's not a very hard prerequisite. I don't think we're going to cover anything in too much detail. So as long as you have basic understanding of some math notation, you should be okay. And we're going to review everything that you need in CS70. So definitely no need to go back and look at CS70 notes or anything like that. Okay, so those are the prerequisites. I'll pause really quickly because I've been talking for a long time. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Oh, and lastly, it's not really a class, but it's very helpful to learn how to pick up new programming languages because, as we said, Project 2 is written in Go, and not a lot of people have experience in Golang, and it's not a prerequisite to know Golang, but it is a prerequisite to be able to kind of pick it up as you go. So again, we will give you resources and help, but it really helps if you have some experience in kind of getting your hands dirty and picking up a new programming language. Why Go? We'll tell you that in, I think, one lecture, so hang on to that question for just a second. So the course structure, so how does this course work? So we have lectures. There are 2 different ways you can actually attend lectures. So you can either come to live lectures, which is this time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Nicholas and I will kind of trade off teaching the lectures, and we'll post recordings of everything. So if you can't make it for whatever reason, you can just watch the recording. The second option is you can watch recorded lecture videos. So these come from way back in spring of 2020. They were presented by professors Raluca Popa and David Wagner, who, in my opinion, are 2 of the best faculty at UC Berkeley. So if you'd like to hear lectures from them, you can also do that. You can also switch between the 2 and see which one works best for you. So the content is exactly the same. It's really up to you which one you want to use. And let's see. So discussions will start Wednesday and Thursday of this week. There's going to be 2 discussions every week. We're not going to force you to attend any section, so you can pick any section that you want to attend. You can attend multiple if you feel like it. And the walkthrough videos will be posted afterwards. So we've had TAs. It'll be a video of the TA basically walking through the entire section. So if you can't make it, we'll have walkthrough videos for the entire semester. The way we do office hours online is we have this office hours queue website. So you'll go there, you can make a ticket saying that I need help, and then the TA will help you and send you a Zoom link so that you can collaborate and get your help over Zoom. And we'll post the office hours schedule on the website. There are 2 exams. So the midterm is on July 13th from 5 to 7 Pacific time. And then the final is August 12th from 5 to 8 Pacific time. And if you can't make it, we have alternate exams, and there'll be a form going out, I would say, in a week or 2. And one nice thing about this class is attendance is always optional except exams. So if you want to never ever show up for anything again and just come for the 2 exams, we're totally okay with that. So we're not going to take attendance. It's not part of your grade or anything like that. Okay. So there are a couple of things that you can use to help you learn over the semester. So we have a textbook now. It's located on the website. So you can just go on the website and the entire book is there. It's completely free. So do not pay for any textbook for this class because the one that we're asking you to read is completely free. It is optional, so we're not going to force you to read it, but students in the past have said that it's very, very, very helpful. So by the survey results, you can see that people have appreciated the textbook. So we highly recommend it. We actually wrote this textbook ourselves from scratch to match lecture contents. So it's gonna hopefully follow the lecture extremely close. So in my personal opinion, I do think it's very helpful and students seem to agree. So I would definitely give it a look if you haven't already. Oh, I guess that you haven't already because today's the first day, but definitely at some point in the semester, give it a look. There's a course website, so this is where everything is located. We have a schedule, we have a calendar, we have Office RQ, everything on there. Oops, I guess that was everything though. So those are the two things that where you can find information. And there are a couple of platforms where you can use to kind of ask us questions. So Piazza is the place where you can ask us questions. We'll try to be on there as much as possible. And if you have a private question that you don't want other people to see, you can make a private post on Piazza. You can also email us if you have a private question, but Piazza tends to be a bit faster. On Piazza, try not to post publicly about answers or project spoilers. So definitely do not post the solution to project one or anything like that on Piazza. Hopefully that's self-explanatory. Gradescope is where everything will be. So all the assignments are going to be submitted and graded on a website called Gradescope. Everyone should be added already, I believe, but if not, you can let us know. And then if you want to email us, the staff email is cs161staff@berkeley.edu. So Piazza is faster, but if you feel more comfortable with email, we're happy to respond there as well. And of course, you can always email Nicholas or I or any TA personally. Okay, the way the class is graded is homework is 15%. Homeworks are, I guess it's not here, but homeworks are pretty low stress. You can try it until you get it right. So most people tend to get 100% because you can, if it's wrong, you can just keep trying until you get it right. Projects are 30%. I would say those are the bulk of the work in this class. Each one is worth 10% of your grade for a total of 30%. There are 2 optional labs. These are just kind of fun assignments. And if you don't do them, then we're going to use your homework or project grade to replace the labs. So there's no obligation to do them. And the reason why they're optional is because COVID is kind of still a thing. Things are online, and we don't want to stress anyone out too much. So hopefully the optional labs being optional will reduce your stress a little bit. And then there's a midterm, 15%, and a final 25%. So the way things are submitted is, well, I guess homework should be done on your own. Again, you can keep trying until you get the answer right. So you'll get a bit of feel for how this works in homework 1. And we're not going to take late homeworks because we do want to, keep the class moving, but we will drop your lowest homework score. So there's 7 homeworks, and we're going to use your highest 6 to determine your grade. Projects and labs can be done individually or in groups of 2 if you want. And there's a penalty system that kind of goes further down if you turned it in late. So hopefully you can get it in on time. And even if you don't, we're going to give you 3 slip days. So slip days can be used if you want to turn in an assignment late, and those will be applied optimally to maximize your grade. Okay, collaboration, let's see. So yeah, definitely this class is kind of like a team effort, right? So everyone can help each other. You can ask us questions, you can answer other people's questions. So we're very happy if everyone does that. Although we don't want anyone to share solutions unless it's with your project partner. You should probably not be looking at anyone else's solutions except your project partners. Definitely, you should not be Googling on the internet for other people's solutions. And I think that takes us to the cheating policy. I think Ron has to go soon though, so we're gonna try to get through this quickly, but Nicholas can take over. Or I guess Ron can take over. Yeah, go for it.
I couldn't access my mute buffer.
No worries. I managed to move my thing by like 5 to 10 minutes.
Oh, excellent.
So,
How about
yeah.
we jump to your slides for 5 minutes and then
That'd
we'll
be
jump
cool.
back.
Thank you.
Sure. Sorry about that. We'll get to all this in a moment. There you go.
Okay, and then if one of you can just kind of click through at a steady pace. Hello, I'm here to talk to you about DSP. That is the Disabled Students Program at UC Berkeley. This is the office that will help get folks set up with accommodations. There's a wide variety of things that they offer. Our school is really rad about that. And then 2 more bullet points. Nice. Are you fixing barriers? Apply. Like, their process takes a bit of time. So I'd highly recommend applying as soon as you can. And on our end, we understand that their process can take a bit. Our goal is to teach you the material. So the more accessible we can make it, the better. As you're going through the course, if you realize that you need an extension or some other accommodation, reach out to us, let us know. We are here for folks regardless of DSP status. We understand with COVID and everything, you're going to have extenuating circumstances. Yeah, so that form will also be accessible on the course webpage. We also wanted to talk more generally about mental health. So we know that this school and this curriculum can be very taxing. We can't do a lot because we have to cover a lot of material, but we do want to reduce your stress where we can. As Perrin mentioned, projects are the heaviest part of this course, and right around the middle of the semester, project 2 is going to be the most intense part of the class. We've shifted stuff so it's lighter at the end because hopefully that'll give you more breathing room to deal with your other classes. Yeah, your health is more important than this course. That's both like a statement and an action. Reach out to us. If you're overwhelmed, there are options. We have a lot academically. If you feel you're falling behind or want to make sure that you have a plan that works well for you in the course. And outside of academics, our school has a lot of resources for mental health. We have our counseling and psychological services on campus. So this has multiple free confidential services, including appointments. And you can go to them for casual things and also for crises. So I've included the links for Let's Talk, which is just if you want to get connected to resources, kind of find out more about what CAPS does, and Urgent, because CAPS is there for you for crisis management. We have 24/7 resources. Click this link and you'll see them. And lastly is our university health services. So this is larger than CAPS. CAPS is just counseling. Our university health services are for chronic conditions. They work with SHIP, and they also have free things for students without SHIP as well. I'd highly recommend looking at it. They've got stuff for our county. You're not on your own in this course.
Yeah, thanks, Ron, for going into that. Ron is great. They've been working with us since last summer, and they've made the course absolutely wonderful. We want to do the best that we can to help you succeed in this course and to help you manage anything else that you might have going on in the meantime. But yeah, going backwards, back to academic honesty. I know Perrin talked a little bit about collaboration, but we do have to set down some policies. We are here to help. Again, we have plenty of resources. Ideally, we understand that there should be no need to cheat. We have resources. And if you're ever feeling that you need to cheat, if you ever feel like, oh, the only way I can succeed is to cheat, please reach out to us. We want to work with you to help you develop a plan to succeed in this course. That being said, we have to have policies in place if academic dishonesty does happen. So at minimum, our policy is that if we do run into cases of cheating, you will receive a minimum of negative points on the assignment. For example, if the midterm is usually worth 100 to 150 points, you will receive a negative 150 on the midterm. And that's just to make sure, like, even if you have a 50% chance of getting caught, it's better for you to not cheat. And again, we don't like doing this. I don't like doing this. Perrin doesn't like doing this, but it has to happen. We'll also refer the student to Nick Weaver, who is the contact for the course this semester, as well as the Center for Student Conduct. CSC doesn't really care about the first case. They're just there to make sure that you don't do it again. So usually the first time, they'll just take your name, they'll put it in a file somewhere. It'll never see the light of day once you graduate. And usually they'll just have you write some essay or something, some sort of token punishment. But it's nothing major. Not that you should, but even if it does happen, the first time is not that bad. And we just want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Of course, if you take the class honesty, you don't need to worry about these. But again, they have to be in place. For example, oops, that was an accident. And you get to see all my tabs. For exam proctoring, we will have Zoom proctoring in place, sort of needed just to make sure that you feel confident that other students aren't cheating and that we feel confident about the grades that we're going to assign. We've done our best to make sure that the policy is low stress. In the past, students have said it's low stress while they feel confident that the exam does feel secure. So we've worked really hard at making sure that happens. And the logistics are available at this link. They should be up to date, but yeah. Went through these a little bit out of order. Sorry about that. Finally, there are some ethics. Of course, we're going to be talking about attacks. And as Perrin said, once you finish with this class, you're going to walk away actually knowing how to attack quite a few systems. It is okay to break into your own systems. This is a good way of testing your security and is just fun. I've done it before with my own system. It's also okay to break into other people's system if they've given you explicit permission. This is a good way to test security. Again, we refer to this as pen testing. It is grossly unethical and exceedingly criminal to break into a computer that is not yours. It's not just a matter of academic dishonesty, it is actually illegal. So in this class, we will present you with a computer that we have given you explicit permission to hack. You may hack that. You may not hack computers outside of this. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone, but we do have to put it out there. Okay, final point of logistics is sometimes you'll see these blue slides. These blue slides are really just stories. So security is often taught well through, telling the story of this company that got hacked or whatever. So we're going to use a lot of stories in our lectures. Those are the blue slides, and the blue slides, the important part is you don't have to remember the specific details. So, you don't have to remember that, oh, XYZ company was hacked in, 1995. But the blue slides will generally have a takeaway at the end. And it's important that you remember the moral of the story. You should remember the concepts that are at play when we're talking about these stories and these case studies. Okay, that concludes our logistics. Are there any final logistical questions before we move into, I guess, the first real content of this semester? Okay, cool. So what is security? We're going to be learning this for the next 8 weeks. We might as well figure out what it is in the first place. Security is enforcing a desired property in the presence of an attacker. So this differs from other courses where you might have taken, where we're just concerned about doing it correctly, about doing it efficiently. Now we have an attacker that we have to deal with. You might imagine this includes confidentiality of data, so making sure data doesn't get read, your own privacy, making sure that things aren't tampered with, integrity, and so on and so forth. This is not quite the same thing as privacy. Privacy is really making sure that your data is protected from unauthorized access. Now, if someone is trying to access your data maliciously, then it overlaps with security quite a bit, but it's still its own sort of field, but it does overlap greatly with security. Security is also not safety. Safety has more to deal with making sure that something works, even if sort of nature goes wrong. So if, I don't know, your computer is struck by cosmic radiation, we still want to make sure that your computer runs correctly, especially if it's something like, I don't know, the computer inside of a medical machine. We want to make sure that it's functioning correctly. Why is it important? It's important for, I didn't mean to make these individual bullet points, but basically all of these. And we're going to get into a couple examples of these, but basically it's everything that you could possibly encounter. Consider, for example, physical safety. These are some headlines that we have. These are sort of formatted in a way that you can copy and paste them and access them in the link. But, FBI probe of alleged plane hack, or pacemaker hacks, especially pacemakers, these devices in our hearts that help keep them beating if you have a medical condition. We want to make sure that they're not hacked. This is literally a life or death situation. You might also consider privacy and confidentiality. So we've heard a lot about this in recent news. These animations are a little bit off of Facebook. And in the past, we've seen that almost every organization has suffered some sort of data breach. Even UC Berkeley or the University of California recently has been hacked and had their files leaked containing students and faculty's private data. And countries and nations have to deal with this too. We've seen a lot of attackers that are actually nation states. So Russia, Ukraine, and so on and so forth. They might do this for political gain. They might do this for economics. Whatever the reason is, every level of society has to deal with this, from you and me to nations and countries. What is hackable? This is a really simple question. This is a really simple question to answer. Everything is hackable, especially if it's connected to the internet, because then anything can access it remotely. You should assume that anything that you connect to the internet, or in general, is a target. There was a story of a casino that was hacked because a fish tank thermometer was able to connect to the internet. And so that was the foothold for attackers to be able to access the network. We also see smart refrigerators, those refrigerators with screens on them, they can also connect to the internet, and they've been used to target businesses. So everything is hackable. You should ensure security for all of these tiny devices. Okay. So that sort of briefly summarizes what security is. We're going to start talking about general overall principles. We'll get into the meat and the sort of attacks and technical information later, but today we really just want to talk about general overarching principles that apply no matter what field of computer science you're working in. So I'm going to start off with this story called the parable of the bear race. So it goes something like this. Two hikers are walking in the woods, and suddenly up behind them comes a huge grizzly bear. It rises up and it roars at them. One of the hikers, they're really scared. They're like, oh gosh, what are we gonna do? I can't die here. And the other hiker is not like that. The other hiker just bends down, they tie their shoes, maybe they take a sip of water. And the first hiker looks at the second, like, why are you not worried? And the second hiker says to the first, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. And this gets us thinking about what do we actually have to deal with when we're dealing with attacks? You don't need to have like a defense that can defend against, the National Security Agency, which we'll see in a moment. You just have to have a good enough defense to make attackers turn elsewhere. And we're thinking about attackers, we're going to get into this idea called a threat model. So a threat model is a model of who your attacker is and the resources they have. Now, this can vary wildly. Maybe it's just, maybe my threat model is p01 if I mess up in lecture. Maybe my threat model is the NSA. It really depends. But we're going to come across this theme really often, and it's that it all comes down to people. If we think about the attackers, well, if there are no attackers, then we don't have a computer security field in the first place because no one's attacking us. But obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, attackers exist. So we have to consider what their motivations are. This is often one of the best ways to think about how to counter the attackers, because if we attack the reasons that they have to attack us, then they don't have a reason anymore, and so they won't be motivated to attack systems, attack us. So what are some of the reasons that attackers attack systems? And feel free to drop some thoughts in the chat. Why would you, maybe as a potential attacker, why might you be motivated to attack a system? I see money, I agree. I see political reasons, I also agree. Blackmail, yes, that has to do with money. I see the one that's just intel, and I'm not sure how to feel about that. Yeah, bored. Yeah, some people actually just do it for fun. Information, yes, to acquire information from the enemy or just from people in general, and you can use it to sell to others, again, for money. So yeah, basically on these slides are all of the answers that exist watching the world burn. Yes, of course. So if we're able to, I guess, attack these reasons, say, we make it so that attackers don't need money anymore, for example, then we can stop them from attacking systems. We're going to consider personal security, just as an example of threat models and who they could be. So why might someone attack you? And these are going to be similar reasons from earlier, so I won't ask you to drop them in the chat. Criminals, they might attack you for money. So we've seen ransomware where it encrypts all your files and asks you to pay them. That criminal wants money from you. Teenagers, they might just attack you for laughs or to win online games. We've seen attacks that are so petty, you just oh, they beat me, so I'm going to, attack their network. It sounds petty, but this has actually happened in the past. Governments, they might try to spy on you to collect intelligence, usually in the sake of national security or whatever they say. And this is actually a really powerful threat model. The intimate partner might spy on you, and they're more powerful than you might think. If you consider, we're going to dig into this threat model really quickly. Consider that they have access to most of your physical devices most of the time. They have intimate knowledge of everything that you do because they're an intimate partner. They can use this knowledge to conduct social engineering attacks against you because they know you so well and they know all the people that you're connected with. And because they're motivated to attack a singular person, there's no way to get them to, say, focus their sights on someone else. They're focused on you. So you can't really attack the reason that they have because they're only have one target in the first place. Okay, so another threat model that we often talk about is the National Security Agency. And you'll see this come up in future lectures, basically for the rest of this semester. But the stated purpose is to collect information and to protect the national security interests of the United States. Since they've been founded, they have decoded enemy communications in wars. They have spied on people in the United States and other countries. Sometimes this is illegal, sometimes this is not. They've participated in security research and helped us develop security standards. So, their interests are in security, so inevitably they have to develop protocols and algorithms that help us stay secure. And they've developed secret techniques for surveillance and cyber attacks. So they actually have some exploits that they don't tell anyone about, so no one can fix, and they use those for surveillance and for other reasons. For better or for worse, the NSA has become an essential part of computer security. A lot of people don't like them because I personally think they've overstepped their bounds with regards to what they can and should spy on, but they are still a part of the field that we work in, whether we like it or not. All right, so we have common assumptions that we will make about attackers. These assumptions really just help us to consider the most powerful adversary that is reasonable for a given threat model. So we should assume that the attacker can interact with our systems without notice. So oftentimes they'll probe systems before they even execute the attack. And you should assume that you won't notice these probes. You should assume that they will attack all of a sudden and without notice. So you always have to be on guard, or your systems always have to be on guard. Also assume that they know general information about the system. So you assume that if, say, you're using some software that has a vulnerability in it, they know that vulnerability. If you have, I don't know, an IT person that goes on break at 5:30 p.m. every day, you should assume that they know that and be able to ensure security in spite of that. Also assume that they get lucky. Often we'll see attacks that only succeed, say, 1 in a million times. Well, because the attacker is smart and because the attacker has access to computers, assume that that attacker will just try 1 million times. The attacker can just automate things, and 1 in a million chance is so large compared to some other probabilities that we'll see lately that it's actually basically 1 for the intents of considering security. Yes, we'll talk about how to defend against certain attacks, or against most of the attacks that we'll talk about in this course as well. You can also assume that they'll coordinate complex attacks across different systems. So assume that they're smart, assume that they can basically do complicated things. And you should assume that they have the resources to mount the attack. Now, this is a little bit finicky because depending on your threat model, this might be a lot of resources, or this might just be their single computer on their home network. But you should assume that they have whatever resources that they will attempt as their threat model. Oh yes, and you should assume that they can and will obtain privileges if possible. So if there's an opportunity for them to sort of create a foothold in your network or some sort of privilege, basically, you should assume that they will do that. All right, final thing, and then we'll stop for a couple of questions really quickly. We have this idea called the trusted computing base. So we've talked about what are we defending against? And the trusted computing base is really what we're relying upon. So if the elements of the trusted computing base, the TCB, don't work, then we have no security. We have to rely on these components. So the properties that we want from this TCB are that it's correct, that it works correctly, that it's complete, so you can't somehow bypass the TCB, you have to go through it, and that it's secure. So you should make sure that the TCB can't be tampered with, or it's no longer trusted. Generally, you want it to be as small as possible. If your trusted computing base, if your TCB is 10 million lines of code, there's no way you can make sure that there are no bugs in that entire TCB. So what you really want is a small part of your system that is maybe, I don't know, say 1,000 lines of code that you can easily read through and see, make sure, okay, there are no bugs in here. And as long as that is correct, that should ensure the security of the entire system. So you might need that. Actually, I won't get into that. We'll talk about operating systems a little bit later. Yes, and this brings us to something called the KISS principle, which is keep it simple, stupid. The simpler it is, the easier it is to verify its correctness and completeness and security. Okay, that concludes our first security principle. The future ones probably won't be this long, but are there any questions so far? Okay, cool. And feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go along as well. Either Perrin can answer them in chat or I can see them and answer them aloud. Okay, this brings us to the next security principle, and we're going to, it's not a story per se, but this is a dialog box that used to pop up in this browser. It's called Internet Explorer. You might have heard of it. So this is what pops up. This is basically whenever you connect to the internet, they're going to flash this warning box at you. But what it really looks like to users is this. When you see a dialog box like this, you should click yes to make it go away. Sometimes, if available, you should click the checkbox first to avoid being bothered by it again. And this is what everyone does because no one wants to be interrupted because Internet Explorer is telling you that you're connecting to the internet. Here's another example that is even worse. It's just this cryptographic gobbledygook that no one actually understands, or you'll understand it after you take this course, but it's long and it contains a bunch of information that no one really wants to know. And what it looks like to people is this. Blah, 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 geek speak, geek speak. Do I want to make this message go away permanently? Do I want to make it go away temporarily, but have it come back? Or have it stop doing, or stop doing whatever it is that I was trying to do? And we all know what users do here, and they just want to go back to whatever they're doing, because again, they don't want to be interrupted. And so the takeaway here is the security principle that we're calling consider human factors. And this comes back to the theme that we was talking about earlier. It all comes down to people. With regards to the users like convenience. I like convenience. I like to be bothered as little as possible sometimes, or all the time. And if a security system is unusable, it will be unused. So if your security system is awesome, if it can ensure that attackers will never attack you ever, but it also makes the user extremely frustrated, users will not use your security system. They'll even find ways to subvert security systems if it makes their lives easier. So if you've ever visited a website that has like, oh, your password needs to be 20 characters and include a special character and a number and a symbol and something else, I don't know. You're just gonna like write that password down on a Post-it note and put it on your computer monitor, or like put it in a text file or something. So even if that is more secure in theory, after you consider human factors, it's actually really insecure. We can also talk about the programmers. Programmers make mistakes. I have written code that's segfaulted. I'm pretty sure everyone here has, if you've written C and taken 6-7C. We use tools that allow us to make mistakes. And this is inherently an issue because we would rather prevent these mistakes from happening in the first place. But we use languages like C and C++ that allow the programmer to easily make mistakes that the attacker can exploit in the future. And pretty much everyone else is also important when it comes to security. We see social engineering attacks that are basically attacks that exploit trust in others. So if you call support on the phone and they grant you access because, I don't know, you called them and they wanted to be nice. That's a social engineering attack, and you're relying on their trust in you. So what this really points to is that when you consider human factors, what you should do is consider the tools that are presented to users and make them foolproof. And when I say foolproof, I mean literally, if a fool uses it, it should still be used well. A good example of this is security keys. So again, passwords, I talked about them just now. Users come up with bad passwords and then they stick them on their monitor. But we've come up with this idea of security keys, and this leverages our entire lifetime of knowing how to protect physical keys and applies them to cybersecurity. So this is a good idea because it helps, it makes sure that users don't like just leave their keys on the floor because they know that, oh, this is a key and I should protect this just as I protect real physical keys. Okay, next one, we're going to talk about a bit about physical safes. So we want our physical safes to stop people from breaking into our things. So a good way that we're going to measure them by is how long does it take an expert to break into a safe. The keyword here is expert. We don't want some like Joe Schmo on the street just breaking into it. We want to make sure someone who knows how to use tools is trying to break in. That's going to be our threat model for this scenario. So this is a TL15 safe. It takes 15 minutes for an expert with common tools to break into the safe. And this is actually a test that is done. An expert is handed tools and told to break into the safe, and they're like, oh, it takes more than 15 minutes. Moving up a notch is the TL30. So this is the same thing, but now it takes 30 minutes with common tools instead of 15. This is TRTL30. So this is the same thing as before. It's still 30 minutes, but now this expert has access to common tools as well as a cutting torch. So just a torch that gets so hot it can melt through the walls, or it can melt through metals. And finally, this is TXTL. This is 60 minutes for an expert with a cutting torch, tools, and 4 ounces of explosives. And the number that I'm going to draw your attention to are these prices here. You'll notice the TL15 safe is $3,000. And this TXTL 60 safe is $50,000. And what you might notice is that this one is more expensive. And this points us to the idea of security is economics. Oftentimes, we'll see cost-benefit analyses come up in security. More security in general is more expensive. If I want a bigger safe, that bigger safe is going to cost me more. The same principle applies in computer security. And if the attack costs more than the reward, then the attacker probably won't do it. So if the, say, expected cost is, oh, I'm going to be sent to prison, and there's like a 90% that I'm going to be caught, and the benefit is really just, I don't know, I'll get $10 out of your bank account, then the attacker's not going to do it. And sort of on the inverse side of that, you don't put a $10 lock on a $1 item, because if that item gets stolen, you can just buy another $1 item. Security is economics. Unless that $1 item can be used to attack something even more valuable. So you're sort of expanding your cost-benefit analysis here and realizing, oh, that $1 rock can be used to break into like a $100 safe or something. I don't know. A more real-world example of this is that oftentimes we'll see undiscovered attacks in devices. So I was talking earlier about the NSA has these undiscovered exploits that they'll use. And you wouldn't risk using them on some random civilian who they don't have an interest in. For example, iPhone security vulnerabilities, they go for $1 million on the market, give or take. So if the expected benefit of spying on you in particular, is less than $1 million, then they're not going to risk exposing that $1 million security vulnerability. Now, if you are a $1 million target, maybe you should, I don't know. I was going something like that. Anywho, the next one that we'll go through, and then I think we're going to take a short break because or we might not, we'll see, is burglar alarms. So many houses have this. The house that I'm in right now has one of the security systems. They essentially are companies that will detect break-in, and then they'll call the police for you. The issue with this is that false alarms are set off way too often. I've set off the false alarm here probably at least once a month. So security companies will often just not call the police because they're just assuming that the alarm is a false alarm. Someone didn't actually break in. It was just, Nicholas opening the door again on accident. But placing the sign outside helps deter burglars from entering because they fear getting caught. Their expected cost is now higher because they know we have a security system, even if we don't have the alarm installed. So they don't know if we have an alarm installed, but this raises their expected costs either way, and it deters them from breaking in. But the takeaway here in general is that we want to prevent attacks, in this case through deterrent, but we still want to detect them if we can, because if someone breaks into our house and steals something without us even knowing, it's really hard for us to do anything about it if we didn't know that the attack happened in the first place. So the security principle here is detect if you can't prevent. We have a couple definitions here. Deterrence is to stop the attack before it happens, so that's this placing the sign outside. Prevention is stopping the attack as it happens. So, for this house, I might install security bolts and install a really secure lock. And this is stopping the attack while it's happening rather than preventing it before it's happening. Detection is to learn that there was an attack. So that's that security alarm company that tells me, hey, your house was broken into earlier today. Sorry. And response, I'll get into this in a moment. Response, you should do something about the attack. So if you have detection, but you don't have response, this doesn't actually help you that much, because if you know that the attack happened, but you don't do anything about it, then it's not really any good that you learned that the attack happened. So you want to try to prevent the attack if you can, but if you can't, you should still try to detect the attack. And once you detect the attack, you should respond to it. So an example of what response might look like is mitigation and recovery. You should always assume that bad things will happen. This is one of the things that we talked about in the threat model earlier. You should have a plan to get security back in a way that lets you get to a working state. So that's the mitigation and recovery part of this response. If we consider, for example, earthquakes, have resources for 1 week of staying put. So that's this giant barrel of food here. This is not mine. I think this is just some stock photo off the internet. And have resources to travel 50 miles from my current location. So this is part of a response or a plan for a response. So I can't prevent an earthquake from happening. I can detect it happened because, oh no, the ground is moving underneath my feet. And this is my response plan. More pertinent example to computer security is ransomware. Ransomware will, again, encrypt your files and then ask you to pay money to decrypt them. So the mitigation here is to keep offsite backups. You can't prevent the ransomware, but you can prevent, its effects. You can mitigate its effects. Okay, here's an example of what happens if you have detection but no response. So Bitcoin, which we'll talk about in lecture 12, I think, transactions, they're irreversible. So there's no way, if you send money to someone, there's no way to get that money back unless they specifically send it back to you. NiceHash, which is a hashing cryptocurrency exchange, $68 million was stolen from it in December of 2017. There were 4 multi-million attacks on Ethereum in July 2018. And Coinbase, which is, actually, I don't remember what it is technically, has 1 detected theft per day. The thing here is because Bitcoin transactions are irreversible, there's no way to get this $68 million back. There's no way for Ethereum to recover 4 times multi-million-dollar attacks. And there's no way for whoever's Bitcoin are stolen on Coinbase to get their Bitcoins back. There's no way to respond. It's great to have prevention measures, and there are prevention measures, but if you can't, you can't only depend on prevention. You also have to be able to respond. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about another security principle, and we're going to start with the story of the Theodosian walls of Constantinople. So this was an empire that existed way long ago. And they had a wall, but this wall wasn't just a wall. It was actually a moat and then a wall and then a sort of depression. So like not a valley per se, but just a lowered piece of land. And then an even bigger wall. And then they had towers to rain fiery death upon the enemy. And this is basically pointing towards defense in depth. We don't want to rely on just, the wall or just the moat. We want to have these layered defenses in order to prevent the attacker as much as we can. Yes, and then the Ottomans cannonballed them away. Oh well. We want to layer multiple types of defenses together. And this means that in theory, the attacker has to breach all the defenses in order to actually be able to attack the system. But think back to security as economics. Defenses are not free. Defenses cost money, and layering defenses together can cost even more money. And we also run into this issue that defenses are often less than the sum of their parts. So if I have defense A and defense B, and I put them together, it's not necessarily going to be as good as like the ideal of having the attacker breach A and then breach B completely separately. Oftentimes it's not going to be that great. Okay. Perrin, do you mind taking over?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm going to have to request remote control first.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so an example of being less than the sum of their parts is, so again, consider the castle, right? Let's say your castle has like 100 walls built. That's great. The attacker has to go through all 100 walls to get into your castle. And you could build a 101st wall, so build another wall, but that 101st wall is probably not going to give you that much more benefit than, say, when you had one wall and you built the second one. So it's kind of like diminishing returns. The more walls you build, the less protection you get from adding that extra wall. And once you get to 1,000 walls, do you really need that 1,001st wall? It kind of depends, right? And that maybe it's like a security as economics principle. Okay, so here's another example. I don't know why the full screen went out though. Is Nicholas there? Well, that looks very wrong. Help. Oh. That looks even more wrong. Is Nicholas there? I guess not. Okay, well, I guess we'll sit here and help this a little bit. Yeah, well, we'll edit this out in post-production or something. But I think Nicholas is muted also, so is he more disastrous? I'm gonna give up the remote control because it appears to have completely broken things.
Yeah, I can't unmute myself if you're moving my mouse around.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Thanks, Zoom. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't even know where it's gone.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. That was very exciting.
It was. It's not full screen either, but it's not if it is now.
Sure.
Okay, well, I guess I'll try to.
I can also just go back.
Oh, okay. Sure.
That works too. Okay. Wait. Okay, sure. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Yeah, Alexander got it. I couldn't unmute myself because the mouse was moving around. Okay, the next security principle we're going to talk about is actually going to involve all of you telling me what this software can do. So this is a torrenting program called uTorrent, microtorrent. Don't install this. I think this actually has malware in it nowadays. But you get to install it and you open it up. So this is what you normally see. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to download a file. Yes, Perrin, I'm going to aggressively wave at you next time. And this screen pops up and we see that we're trying to download this. We're trying to go to this download folder and so on and so forth. Now, what was this program able to do? The screen just popped up. What just happened? And I'm asking you guys again, what did this program have access to in order to do all the things that it just did? Okay, yes, it's accessing your files, it's downloading files from other computer, it's accessing your downloads folder. You might also see that I can access every folder other than above the downloads folder. So you can see the users folder and the Vern folder here. Anything else? Yeah, okay. It has access to memory. You can also, it can put things on the screen and so on and so forth. These more have to do with permissions and whatnot. So if a program has access to your files, and if it has access to the internet, it could possibly leak your files. Just take your file and send it to someone else, someone malicious maybe. And delete your files, you can see that it was able to sort of open up this folder, and it probably has access to delete things. It can send spam because it can open connections to anywhere it wants, and it can run other malicious programs just because programs are able to do that. This program can do a lot, but what does this program really need to be able to do? What is the minimum amount of permissions that we can give it such that it can still work correctly? This is not a rhetorical question again.
We are almost running out of time though, so
Okay.
you can just skip to it. Yeah.
Okay, we'll speed it along then. It just needs to be able to access the screen. So, we still want the window to pop up. It needs to manage some files and make some internet connections, but not all of them. I think Vern sacrificed their computer back in the day, but I don't know. And the takeaway here is least privilege. So this is what I was talking about with giving this uTorrent program only the privileges that it needs to be able to do its job. If you give it unnecessary permissions, that program can use those permissions against you. So you want to make sure that any program ever only has enough to do its job and no more. Okay, it's a pretty simple one. Hope that makes sense. Oh, how did this happen again? This is really frustrating. I'll figure it out next time, don't worry.
Oh, I somehow still have access. I thought I gave it up. Okay, I gave it up officially now.
Okay, next we're talking about this. This is a nuclear bunker. So I guess the thing to notice here, it's actually kind of hard to see in this image, but there's a little nuclear key switch in this panel over here, and there's a nuclear key switch on this panel way in the back, and it's too far for like one person to be able to reach and turn both keys at the same time. And it's kind of important because these are nuclear weapons. And the idea here is that you need two people to be able to launch a nuclear missile. You can't just have one person who's sort of going off on their own and launching nuclear missiles at Russia or whatever, just for fun. This is another example of what we're going to talk about, is a movie theater. So oftentimes, if you go to movie theaters, not all of them, but some of them, you'll buy your tickets at one booth, and then you'll just take that ticket, walk like 10 steps over to the actual like entry place, and give that ticket to someone else. That ticket will rip your ticket in half, or that person will rip your ticket in half and give it back to you. And that seems a little strange. It's like, oh, why couldn't I just have one person, charge me money and then enter the movie theater? And the reason here is because if that one hypothetical person was just like, okay, I'm taking your money and now letting you in, that movie, what are they called? Technician?
The cashier, the
Cashier,
employee?
yeah, that's the word I'm looking
Okay.
for. That cashier could just pocket that money themselves, and now they're taking money away from the movie theater, and it's hard for the movie theater to prevent that. So this is actually a defense measure, because if you have this system, you need to have that ticket to enter, and that ticket has to come from someone else. So both the entry person and the cashier have to work together in order to actually, cheat the movie theater out of their money. So the security principle that we're talking about here is separation of responsibilities. If you have a privilege, consider having multiple parties who have to work together in order to exercise it. Don't put all your trust in a single party, because it's more likely for one person to be malicious than, say, 10. All right, everyone tell me, what's wrong with this picture? You'll see we have a little guard gate here. This stops cars from driving across. What's wrong here? Yes, everyone's driving around the gate. I personally think this image is really funny. The idea here is ensure complete mediation. Californian drivers, I agree. Ensure that every access point is monitored and protected. So, obviously, if anyone wanted to drive through this road, they'd have to go through this, but they failed to consider this entire access point around here. So what they really should do is build a gate and build a fence on both sides of this so that all traffic has to go through this. So what this is called is a reference monitor, which is a single point through which all access must occur. And the properties that we want from a reference monitor are the same as a TCP, because in fact, the reference monitor is a part of the TCP. If this one point of access is malicious, then suddenly we can't trust anything. A good example of how ensure complete mediation often fails is something called time of check to time of use. So this is a common failure of ensuring that. And we're going to look at the following pseudocode. And it's going to appear one line at a time because I guess that's how we set it up. First, it's going to check the balance, and it assigns a local variable to some, set b equals balance, where balance is some global variable. If b is less than the amount that you're trying to withdraw, then just abort. Then you set the balance to b minus w, so you subtract that w from the balance, and then you give the dollars to the user. Does anyone see any issues with why or how and why this could be exploited? Give like 10 seconds. You might want to consider what happens if we give it a negative number. Okay, yeah, we probably want some code to check the value of the numbers. I wouldn't know how to give negative $5 to a user. Withdraw twice at the same time. Yes, similar times. Yes, that's exactly correct. If this is a flow of code that we might use to exploit the system. Let's say, okay, we're going to let b equals balance. We're withdrawing $4 in this case. If b is less than w, abort. Well, we know that, say, balance right now is 4. So b, 4, is not less than 4, w. Now we're going to stop this flow of execution over here. We're actually going to jump over here. And now we're trying to withdraw 4 again. Balance is still 4, so b is still 4. This check passes again, so both of these checks have passed. Now we're setting balance equals b minus w. So 4 minus 4 is now 0. We give w dollars to the user. And now let's say, okay, we're going to finish this transaction again. B minus w, these are still local to these. So b minus w again is 0. So now we're setting balance to 0 again. And now we've given $4 to the user twice. And this is actually something that happened in Ethereum. I won't go into that right now, but it basically caused hackers to be able to steal tons of money because they were able to write code that sets up these transactions in real time. So this is a time of check of time of use. We're checking B up here, but we're only using it, or we're checking B up here, but we're only using it down here when we actually abort or give the balance to the user. So yeah. Okay, we're almost there. Sorry, I'm rushing through this because we're almost out of time. But these are motorway signs. You might see these if you're driving, I think, anywhere in the United States. If you go into their little boxes, they're controlled by this little console over here. And in fact, you can reset the password if you enter DIPY. So because this default passcode is used everywhere, you can do some pretty funny things with it. I'm not going to read these. I'll just leave them on screen for a moment for you to enjoy.
I'll read them if you want, but I don't know if we have time.
No.
I'll read it afterwards.
Sure.
Stick around. Okay.
Yeah. Also, side note: do not ever do this. Someone from 161 did it once. Do not do this. That is all. This one's my favorite, personally. All right. That's enough sitting in silence. So the issue here is don't rely on security through obscurity. The manufacturers of this sign were relying on the fact that, oh, only people like who actually use the signs will know that the reset code is DIPY. But other people found out, and suddenly there's no security because everyone learned what this default passcode is. So we call this, oh, I did it again. I think I know why it's happening. All right. The principle here is called Shannon's maxim. You should assume that the enemy knows the system. This is how it was originally worded, and I think it's quite succinct. You should never rely on obscurity as part of your security. You should always assume that the attacker knows every detail about your security. And this goes back to, again, your threat model. Assume the attacker knows everything about the things that you're using, about the schedule that your employees are working on, about the software that you're using, and so on and so forth. If you rely on the fact that an attacker doesn't know something, eventually that attacker is going to learn what that thing is, and then you're going to lose your security. All right, almost to the end. Soda Hall. If you're a freshman or sophomore, you've never been in Soda Hall, but hopefully you will be soon when we go in person. But this is one of the rooms in Soda Hall. This really just leads to a bunch of servers and networking equipment. It's not too important. What I want to focus on is this little card key here, because what you do is you scan your, I think it's your Cal1 card in here. I don't have access to it. You scan your Cal1 card here and the door opens and so on and so forth. What do you do if the power goes out? This is a hard question to answer. Well, I guess for this one, it's easier. But if you fail closed, aka if no one can get in when the power goes out because the door stays locked, then I guess no one can access the networking equipment. But what if you need to get in there because, oh, somehow that's how the power outage happened? I don't know. If it fails open, then anyone can get in. But do we want anyone to be able to get in when the power goes out because there's expensive equipment in there? So it's hard to determine what the best option for these closets are. For emergency exit doors, it's a little bit more obvious. We don't want emergency exit doors to be locked in case of a power outage, which could be because of an emergency. So the takeaway here is to use fail-safe defaults. In both of these cases, when the power goes out, the manufacturer has to choose, does it default to fail closed or default to fail open? Generally, you want to choose options that are considered fail-safe, which basically balance security and usability when a system goes down. So it's all fine and dandy when your system is working, but if it goes down, you have to consider what will the behavior be in that case. This can be hard to determine. As we talked about with the door earlier, it could go both ways. With emergency exit doors, it's a little bit more obvious, but it really comes down to your individual use case, what it really means for fail-safe defaults. But we'll talk more about these, at least a bit when we talk about memory safety and cryptography. All right, finally, design and security from the start. And I think this one speaks for itself. When you build a new system, you should include security as part of the design process, rather than patching it in after the fact. A lot of the internet, or a lot of systems that we still use today, did not do this. Email did not do this. The internet did not do this. HTTP, the protocol used for websites, did not do this. And so basically what we have today are a bunch of patches that are really clunky and they're really hard to use and they don't fix the problem entirely. So what you want to do is look back on all these security principles and keep them in mind when you're designing these systems from the beginning, not 2 years later when someone calls you up and says, hey, the system that you wrote has been hacked, can you fix it? Because at that point, it's probably too late. Yes, keep these principles in mind. And this slide is really just for you to study off of when it's inevitably tested on the exam. I'm not going to go through it all, but it's here for you if you need it. We have, actually, how many is this? I know we changed the number this semester, 11 of them. But yeah, that actually brings us to the end of today's lecture. Fortunately, we made it in time. Are there any final questions on any of this or on any of the logistics before we go today? Okay. I see someone's trying to do sign maintenance in the chat. Just don't say you got it from us. I hear that's what the last student did. They put like hacked by CS161 on the sign. That's what Nick told me anyway. Oh yes, good question in the chat. Discussions start on Wednesday. I also have a private message, so I won't say the name, but homework will be submitted through Gradescope. So it'll be instant feedback. So you'll know the answer. You'll know if you got the correct answers correct instantly or not, and you can change it so you'll usually get 100%, but all of it will be on Gradescope. Project 1 will be released on Wednesday, yes. Okay, there are no other questions, I'll stop the recording here and